Moving
Sorry
along.
to bother you.
No, that's all right, Smith. You can bother me whenever you like.
Hey, there's the intro.
I'm so funny.
That's... Oh.
Hello, you are listening to Off Radar, It's a Movie podcast. I'm James Smith, a professional film and video editor.
I'm James Etok, a freelance writer and illustrator specialising in 1980s cartoons.
And I'm Neil Brock, aka Nige, the man with two names, former film journalist and currently working in the games industry.
Each week, one of us picks a movie that all three of us either haven't seen in many years or in some cases haven't seen at all.
We each watch the chosen movie, return to the microphone and let you all know exactly what we thought of it.
I'd never really had any interest in watching it and I was proved absolutely right.
I think it's amazing. I really, really love this film.
The film's still a pile of steaming dog shit.
If you fancy joining in and suggesting a movie for us to watch, why not tweet us at Off Radar Podcast
or email us on offradarpod@gmail.com.
If you like what you hear, please subscribe, share, and by all means, leave a review.
For now, strap in, turn the volume up, and let's go Off Radar. Sorry to bother you, but let's do a podcast. I'm James Smith, and I'm joined by Neil Brock.
Hello.
Oh,
you're not going to do your white voice?
See what you did there?
Straight away. Hello. Eatok's dying.
That caught me off guard. That was very good. Both
actually, yeah, there you go. And James Etok.
Howdy.
See, we're going to need to explain the context very quickly to use that. Otherwise, everyone's just going to think we're.
I think if you've seen the film, you will get the context, and we will get there. Don't you worry. We are talking about a film called Sorry to Bother You, which came out in 2018. This was recommended by a friend of yours, Nige, called Mark Good.
One of the goods.
One of the goods.
Yeah. So, he's got in touch and recommended this one for us to watch. First up, had anyone seen this or even heard of this film before we did it for the podcast?
Yes, I'd actually watched it probably in, I'd say, a couple of years back. So maybe like 2020 or something like that.
Oh, okay, nice.
And I can't remember why I watched it. I saw that. So the main person, it's LaKeith Stanfield, who's probably most famous for Atlanta, but was also in Get Out and The Knives Out as well. And I heard some interesting things that it was very like Gondry-esque, and that's kind of right up my street. So yeah, I watched it.
How about you, Etok? You seen this one?
No, I'd never seen it. I'd heard of it. For some reason, I remember like the poster really striking me because it was like that. It's got a very, very strong style in terms of its advertising. So I remember seeing the poster and him with the bandage around his head with the blood, and I was like, just when a film catches your eye poster. So never saw it though.
Bit of a kind of Spike Lee kind of look about it, actually, hasn't it? The poster.
Yeah, it has got to do the right thing.
Do the right thing.
Style
bold, bold colours and I hadn't seen it. I actually hadn't heard of this film either. Hence why I said, had you heard of it? So yeah, quite a, I knew nothing about it going into it either, I should say, before I watched it, which it's kind of took me off guard a little bit. But yeah, as you say, so it's written and directed by Boots Riley. I've not seen a lot of his work. It's his debut feature film.
Well, he's known as he was one of the founding members of, is it The Coup? So a hip hop band.
The Coup, would it be? The Coup?
Death to the pigs is my basic statement. I spit street stories till I taste the pavement. Trying to stay out the pen where we face enslavement. Had a foolproof hustle till they trace the payments. And
yeah, as you say, LaKeith Stanfield, who, obviously we talked about Get Out on the podcast. He played Andre in Get Out. And like you say, Atlanta, which I know you really like, Nige, which is on definitely. The list.
I've never even heard of Atlanta.
It's a TV show, so it's got Childish Gambino, a.k.a. Donald Glover.
Donald Glover, yeah.
And LaKeith Stanfield's obviously in it as well.
Donald Glover, not Danny Glover, who is also in this film.
Who's in this film, yes.
Who I didn't recognise, to be honest with you, to begin with. I was like,
come on.
Who is that? I didn't. I honestly didn't.
You didn't recognise that?
No, it really threw me.
I was like,
who is that? Who is that? I recognise that guy. Oh, it's Danny Glover. It took like 30 seconds.
30 seconds?
By the time
leave me alone.
By the time you figured that out, he was too old for this shit.
He was. I'm getting too old for this shit. Nice,
I've done
nice quote. Nice quote. Tessa Thompson, who we will be talking about again in the Creed franchise, I am sure.
Yes.
And yeah, like a couple of supporting cast. So Danny Glover, Stephen Yeun,
yeah, from The Walking Dead, Beef, and he was in Nope as well quite recently.
Yeah, so
he was in Nope. I was watching it thinking, where do I know this guy from? Nope, of course, he's the cowboy child actor.
Ranch
actor. Yeah.
Bit of Terry Crews as well.
Terry Crews with hair was one of my favourite. Like, that made me laugh out loud. You see Terry Crews with this like little wig. I was like, it's Terry Crews.
And then Armie Hammer as well from The Social Network.
Oh, yeah. The Social Network.
He was in The Man from U.N.C.L.E. as well, I think.
Okay.
With old Superman in as well.
And Nige, I asked you to give us a little synopsis of this film.
You liar.
Sorry to bother you, Nige, but what's it about?
That's what he's done there.
Well, I'm going to do it for a whole episode.
Doing my best Etok impression. I'll leave it on a cliffhanger. So, Cassius Cash Green lives in his uncle Sergio's garage with his girlfriend Detroit, an artist and free-spirited independent woman. However, Cassius is struggling to pay his rent, so goes to get a job as a telemarketer for Regal View, a company which is essentially a front of sorts for Worry Free, a company that offers lifetime employment to be housed and work in factories. Cash has trouble with his customers until Langston, Danny I'm too old for this shit Glover, an older co-worker, teaches him to use his white voice on calls, which it turns out Cassius is absolutely amazing at. Being a telemarketer and living through commission, his partner and a work colleague called Squeeze joins in a big protest to try and form a union, but instead of Cassius getting fired, he gets promoted to be a power caller, a position where he lives a new life through his white voice with all the money and trappings he'd always wanted. In his quest, however, for more money, he starts to lose himself, loses Detroit's respect, and even becomes an internet meme before falling even deeper into a conspiracy of slavery, exploitation, and giant horse dicks.
Wow.
You buried the lead, Nigel.
So there you go.
If you've not seen this film, then
well, it could be anything about giant horse dicks.
You could.
Also, if anybody's listened to this, they will have seen the film. It's simple as that, because there's no point. It's like, go and see the film before listening to this.
Don't watch films. Just listen to us. You don't need to watch the film again. Yeah, we're much better.
I'm just out here surviving. And what I'm doing right now won't even matter.
Oh, baby, it will always matter. Oh, thought you said you fixed that.
Get a room! I got a room, mother.
Yeah, so straight away into this film, the look and feel of this film, we start with kind of big wides and yellows. Like you say, lives in this garage. But he is a bit of an outcast of where he lives, the world he's in. He wants money, and I think that's the biggest point of this film to start with. Is it's about capitalism. I mean, there's a lot of things it's about, but to begin with, anyway, he doesn't really have any money, and the soundtrack is quite different at the beginning because it's quite positive and upbeat and kind of almost it contrasts against the poverty and the squalor that he's in.
Well, it's a world not that unlike our own kind of thing, but there's a lot of quirks about it, and I think the way they kind of present it, especially like the garage, is amazing. You don't realise it's a garage until get jiggy with it, and suddenly the door comes open. It's just quality. And then when he gets the job at the telemarketers, like one of the first days, he's driving his like completely beaten up car that's absolutely knackered.
Looks like an in-betweeners car, from that episode.
It's just a stinker with all different panels and bus wankers and all that stuff. But they drive past what's almost like favelas, these sort of places where people live essentially on the streets in these temporary homes, like shacks built up. So the poverty is very, very clear from the start, and this big divide between those that have and those that don't.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously he's working for a huge corporation that you get the impression make a lot of money, but the fact he works on a pretty lowly job, not getting a lot of money.
He gets paid on commission, doesn't he? Yeah, he doesn't even get a set salary.
And Yeah, the fact that he's basically trying to sell, and like very, very early on, like we say, well, I think you said in your thing, like Danny Glover says, you've got to use your white voice, which obviously hints straight away, or not even hints, smacks you in the face at discrimination that people would make if you're selling something to them and you can't sell in your normal voice, whether that be black or Asian or whatever.
I was going to say, before we get there, we do get, like, I do like the fact that, he goes to the job, first day he kind of sits down and starts making these calls. And that was one of the weird things that I was just like, what? When the movie started, was that he starts making the call and immediately...
He's in the bedroom of
he's in the bedroom of
whatever.
Someone, or he's in the living room. He's literally the desk and himself are transposed into the room.
Yeah.
But the first time he does it, he's shocked by it. So I was like, is he actually jumping into their rooms, or are we going for an artistic?
Yeah.
And immediately my mind went to Michel Gondry. I was like, oh, are we going for like this Michel? I didn't know there was any kind of hint or kind of acknowledgement of his work. So I was just like, okay, is this what we're doing? Like, whenever he makes calls, he goes, and the other thing is, whilst he's making these calls, in the background, when it cuts back to him in the office, there's all these weird scenes with the photocopier. Like, I think it's a photocopier or a printer, or all these papers are going back in the office, and these people behind the office glass are trying to, and they're having all these arguments. I was like, okay, so this is like a very weird world we're entering.
This is telemarketing. Stick to the script.
Hey, hello. Mr. Davison, Cassius Green here. Sorry to bother.
Let me give you a tip. You want to make some money here? Use your white voice.
My white voice.
I'm not talking about Will Smith's wife, like this young blood.
Hey, Mr. Kramer. This is Langston from Regal View.
As always, we'll be getting that out to you right away.
You're doing so good with the voice thing.
Holla, 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 holla.
Funnily enough, that was a gag in, I think it was Bad Boys 2.
Oh, wow.
When he's like, this is the thing, I think it was Bad Boys 2, or maybe it was 1, I forget, but it's, they're going into a house, and he's like, he says something like, use your white voice, and Martin Lawrence is like, can we pour a bowl of sugar? But he does it in a very kind of, he tries to take all the bass out of his voice, and then
but the weird thing with the white voice in this, though, is it's not just a white voice, it's like a accentuated cartoon.
Well, it's an overdub.
It's David Cross, isn't it?
It's David, I caught David Cross. Yeah, I was like, this is Arrested Development.
Which is obviously so, because LaKeith Stanfield's voice is very deep, and he has it like, so the contrast to this cartoon-esque white voice is massive. And at first, to be honest with you, I was like, man, I don't like this voice that he's putting on. This is annoying. And I guess maybe that's meant to be, but like it was like really bugging me, because
likewise, it took
comedy,
me out of the movie.
It did for me. Like, the comedy was just not landing, especially in that first half an hour.
Well, he eventually meets someone else who's got like a white voice, and that's actually voiced by Patton Oswalt as well. So again,
Patton Oswalt, yeah,
American comedian. But I mean, you can tell this film's kind of slightly off the wall right from the start. Definitely, in the sense of when he goes to the interview, he's like made up a bunch of stuff, and he's got a trophy. And he's like, "What's this trophy in your bag for?" And it's like, and he's got like employee of the month thing for the bank, and it turns out the guy he's interviewing was like, no, I actually worked there as a manager, I don't remember you being there. It's like, we'll give anyone a job, don't worry about it. And it's like, stick to the script and all that
stick
kind
to
of
the
stuff.
Script.
But yeah, and like you say, there's quite a few instances in this film of just like kind of weird stuff happening, and you're a bit like, okay. But then some of it's like really cool and interesting. Like I personally, I love it when he kind of jumps into those calls, and it kind of, as it goes on, and he's sort of doing calls at the different level, when he becomes like a power caller.
The businessman on the toilet. That's
exactly like he presses the button for him on the
I think it takes you a while. Well, it took me a while to settle into this film because of that. Because like to begin with, I was like, oh, this is obviously going to be about him like going into this different world or something. So it kind of, I mean, I know it does this on purpose. It tries to, make the audience feel on edge by doing these like weird things with the scenes, and like, but like it did take me a good half an hour to kind of settle on this film, and because of those reasons, because of the going into someone's house. I was like, what's this about then? And then the white voice thing, and then, you know, obviously later on in the film, like I feel you get settled, and then there's another massive moment, which I'm sure we'll get to.
What I did like is we get those teases for Worry Free, because at first we don't know that Worry Free are connected to this to the telemarketing thing. Yeah, we just think the telemarketing thing is what it is.
Like Smith says, encyclopedias or something like that, isn't it?
It's exactly that, encyclopedias. And we get the impression, like the kind of guy who reminds me of Christopher Lloyd, the kind of floor manager.
Yes,
that guy
he's like bonkers. Yeah,
but he reminded me of like a young Christopher Lloyd. If you ever saw Christopher Lloyd in Taxi, the TV series, it kind of like he wasn't Doc Brown. He was like a more. I mean, his performance in Taxi is amazing. If you ever watch Taxi, watch the episode where Christopher Lloyd, as I forget the character's name, and he goes to a dinner party and he plays the piano fucking expertly. It's like one of the best things I've ever seen. But he reminded me of Christopher Lloyd. But he keeps saying like you know up there power callers, and the kind of what all the telemarketers want to achieve is this sense of, if we become a power caller, that's where the real money is.
You're going upstairs, power caller. They even have their own elevator.
Welcome, power caller. I hope you did not masturbate today. We need you sharp and ready to go.
Well, it's interesting, like Stephen Young's character, he plays like Squeeze, who's the one who's like fight against the machine.
He is the union kind of guy, the one who sets up the union, basically.
Yeah, well, he says quite early on, it's like almost sort of calling out the American dream of like, you work as, I can't remember, it's like a burger flipper type thing. And then if you do really well, then one day you'll be like assistant manager or something like that. And it's like, you know what? It's not that big a jump. It's not really that huge thing to aspire to. You're still being crushed by the capitalist machine. It's like, but obviously we later find out the power caller is this completely different world of just luxury and money and anything you could ever dream of, and a guy with an eye patch and a white voice, which is whose name they cannot say.
No, which reminded me of Kill Bill, as like with Beatrix Kiddo. Whenever they said her name, it's like beep, and you're like, well, why are they doing that in the film? And then they actually, I think it's in Kill Bill 2, actually say her name, and you're like, okay, I guess that was an interesting gimmick.
I really like the fact that so obviously Cassius, or Cash, which he's called in the film, his relationship with Tessa Thompson's character, Detroit, is great. So she's basically like a kind of artist, like trying to make it, but at the same time she works at the same company, we should say, but they seem like their kind of end goal seems so different. Like Cassius is obviously, he's trying to make money because he hasn't got any, but at the same time, once he does get money, he becomes kind of embroiled in this kind of like moral dilemma of where do I keep going or do I not, with everything else that's going on in this company.
I would say he makes that decision quite quickly, to be honest. That's the interesting thing about his character, and he admits that later in the film. He's like, to his friends, I'm sorry I betrayed you, but because you think like, because he crosses that picket line very quickly. As soon as he's given, they all go, like Nigel saying, the main guy organising the strike, they all organise the strike, but they do this. They do this protest in the middle of the office. They all stand up,
phones down,
and then the next scene, it's Cash with the manager, and they're like, pack up your things, and Cash is like, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, and they're like, no, you misunderstand, you're packing your stuff because you're going up to, it's a really great scene.
He gets a promotion. It's basically like The Office, isn't it?
It really is, because they're like, drink the champagne. He's like, what now? And he's like all awkward. They're like, oh, look at him go, and they all start dancing. And it's all really silly. But then the next scene is they're all outside protesting, and he literally just crosses the picket line, and then many scenes later, he crosses the picket line, confronts his former friends, and he's like, look, you do you, I hope you get what you want, but
I'll be on the sidelines kind of thing.
That's what he keeps saying, the sidelines.
But this is different, because obviously he's almost seeing them as two different companies, isn't he? So.
And then you get that real drift in their characters, like going apart, basically, like both physically and emotionally throughout this film, because she gets more kind of embroiled in the messaging of what she's trying to prove through her art. I mean, like the art scene, which I know comes later, where they're like chucking like stuff at her, like
mobile
phones and blood,
like bullet casings.
Really impactful.
She puts on like a performance, essentially.
Which made me laugh, because she goes, I will be reciting dialogue from The Last Dragon. I was like, fucking, that's such a great pull. You both must have seen The Last Dragon, the
like
black
Bruce,
the black martial arts film. From that. Sure enough, that's like that film is. That's one we should definitely do on the podcast because that is
a banging soundtrack as well.
A banging soundtrack
made by like people.
It's Quincy Jones. I think Quincy Jones. I think he might have produced it. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he produced it. But yeah, she goes. I will be reciting a looping line from the Last Dragon. I was like, wow, there's a reference.
She kept saying Kew Gardens as well. She kept Smith. You've worked on Kew Gardens.
Well, obviously Kew Gardens. I wrote that down, and Kew Gardens.
Of course you did.
Because
I've been to Kew Gardens.
No, I've been to Kew Gardens. No, I've worked for Kew Gardens, but I've made films about. Basically, it's about empire and colonialism, where Kew used to get all their plants from all of those places. So they used to go across and get plants back in the day. So it wasn't great, and I mean, I think Kew have obviously acknowledged their past, much like Empire and British Empire and stuff like that. But yeah, that's why she keeps referencing Kew basically. But it's quite a weird one. It's quite a bit of a random one to keep referencing in this film, Kew Gardens.
I mean, like with all due respect to art installations and exhibitions like that.
Yeah, that's true.
It is what it is, and like I think Cash is kind of semi in the right in that scene where he kind of runs in and says, "What are you doing?"
Did you know you can now subscribe to Off Radar? It's a movie podcast on YouTube. You can watch exclusive trailers and listen to brand new full episodes. All links and info in the description down below.
Somebody stop me!
Well, it's really interesting because you see loads of aspects of it on like billboards and stuff like that about this
little teasers,
perfect family, like a classic TV commercial. And essentially, it's like people will sign over themselves a lifetime contract to go work in factories and basically live on site. And obviously, because poverty is so bad, people can't afford rents, they can't afford food. It's like a way of you being able to live your life and not have to worry about that side anymore. But what it actually is, it's more like organised slavery, and
they call it no wage labour.
Exactly, and it becomes apparent that what sort of Cassius is selling over the phone is access to these workers. And to like, I think at one point he speaks to a sort of Japanese businessman and says, "Well, we'll get people to build your mobile phones for half the price," kind of thing, and you don't have to pay them anything because they're just owned by us. And again, it's that very, very clear anti-capitalist sort of push against what worry-free are. And the CEO is this guy called
Steve Lift,
played by Armie Hammer, and because Cassius gets into the power sellers, he gets to go to a party at his house, which is it becomes bizarre, and it's one of the most awkward scenes where they ask him to rap
because he's like,
I'll put a clip in. It's one of the most impactful scenes of this whole film. Bizarre scene because first of all, there's a couple of things. So he assumes he can rap because he's black, and he's like, right, you can rap for us. And then the next scene is him with a mic in front of everyone. Insert clip here.
Nigga shit, 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 nigga shit.
But the fact when they're rapping, like everybody's loving it, apart from him, and it's like, what are you watching? Why is this good? And and I mean, why even Cassius from this point of view? Why has he decided that this is what they want? But he has obviously read the room, hasn't he? But yeah, like this whole message, like up until that point about the slave labor and stuff like that. But the fact that he is kind of like, he's in this position now where he's got enough money, really. He doesn't need to work for them anymore, but now he's got that kind of greed. So it's about the greed and hunger that you have when you have money, and then all of a sudden it's quite hard for him to let that go, even though he knows what's going on with this slave labor.
Well, I think as well, there's part of it that he looks quite often to a photo of his dad stood next to quite a nice car, and it's like this aspirational thing. I want to do my dad proud. The fact his nickname is Cash shows this kind of very obvious lean into, I'm trying to earn money, like trying to provide for his partner. I think she starts off like spinning those like classic sign spinners on the side of the street. So then, as you mentioned, she gets a job working with him. But yeah, it's very clear they're not particularly well off, and there is this underclass in America. And obviously it's very clear even now looking at the States the sort of, whilst it's not as a classist system as perhaps even the UK, there's definitely an element of the haves and the have-nots, and like the working class people getting trod all over.
One of my favourite things to describe to people, and by favourite I mean kind of in a twisted sense, is that when I went to Los Angeles in 2019, I went along Hollywood Boulevard, as I've done for decades prior, and the homeless situation there is ridiculous now. Like I've said before, there's homeless communities there, which should be an oxymoron, but it's not. There are homeless communities. And one of the most striking things, which I showed a friend on Google Maps, on Google Street View, which you can do, is something I saw, which is I was walking along and I saw Netflix, this billion dollar corporation. I was like, wow, this huge building, right? And it stands out like a sore thumb. It's next to an American football pitch. The reason I know it's there is because I was in a Denny's restaurant and I was sitting there going, oh, there's Netflix. And you come out of there, and I'm visually describe this, so it's not very good for listeners, but you've got this huge corporation, this big monolith to I don't want to sound cheesy to say corporate greed, but you know what I mean. Netflix, they have a bob or two, and this building is right next to a freeway, and on this freeway, on the banks of the freeway, the grass verges, people sleep homeless in tents next to the freeway. Yeah. So you've got people sleeping overlooked by this billion-dollar company, and when you look at it on Google Street View, it's phenomenal, because it really is, like Nigel said, the haves and the have-nots. But it's just like, that's a fine example. I think this film does that really well when you see the streets of these homeless communities, where it's just like, how, and America's so bad now. People live in RVs. I know this getting to the whole thing here, but
Oakland especially is one of the most deprived parts of the States. And like you mentioned, obviously that whole Netflix thing in California. Well, you look at like San Francisco. There's a huge homelessness.
It's ridiculous there now,
and obviously everyone's absolutely minted and can't even afford to rent or buy homes. Even like the richest of the rich working in Silicon Valley, because there's such disparity between people that own all these properties, that are using them as Airbnbs, that are doing whatever they want with them. And like everyone's right should be to have a roof over their head, and obviously it's almost impossible.
They even show that in this film on the floors, right? Because you've got one floor that is like the extreme wealth, where you go up in this lift, and the floor below where he has come from, was part of that kind of squalor and poverty. I actually, just on that gold lift, I think that is one of the funniest scenes in the whole film.
When she's putting the code in,
I timed it 40 seconds.
The assistant really well. The assistant made me laugh as soon as she walked in. She says, "Right, let's do this, motherfucker." And the delivery of that line made me like literally piss myself, which it doesn't often happen in like films in general, but it really made me laugh. And then the typing of the thing. Yeah. But what I loved about that gag is they come back to it later and he's doing it as well, and it's like it's not just like a one-off gag, but they revisit that, and the fact that they've got to put in all those numbers because they're that worried that the poor people are going to come up in the gold lift and remember a 4-digit code. So it's like everything in this film does have some kind of message and meaning behind it.
I do like her character, like her awkwardness, but overly confident. Like we meet her straight away when they're having like a little bit team meeting exercise, and she's not comfortable in her own skin, but she's pretending to be. But when they're in the lift, when she gets in with him, and then when he gets out, you can tell she's attracted to him because he's all suited and booted. But it's the way she plays it. Like even when the doors are closing, she kind of goes to open her mouth to say something, the doors just close on her. But he goes up and obviously he finds out what he'll be doing up on that floor, gets invited to the party, and ends up in Steve Lift's private office. He starts showing this, or he's about to show him this video, and he's like,
he's desperate for a piss.
Yeah, he's like, which I thought was like a really nice gag, because you never get that in movies. And it's like, this guy's he's been at a party this time, probably does want to do a bit of a wee. So he's a bit desperate. He goes, and he starts like moving on his chair. And I've got to go. He goes, okay. He goes, go to the
Before he goes, just very quickly, like in the office, I don't know if you noticed, behind Lift's desk, all the paintings are like of equestrian portraits, and even the plate has a horse.
The horse on the plate, Mr. Bobo. Yeah. That's why I remember that. It made me laugh. Yeah, he goes go to the jade door, and he goes out, and the first thing you notice is like there's 2 doors, I think, and like they all look green, they all look jade coloured, and all I can describe it's like the moment when you first see From Dusk Till Dawn. You're like, wait, what? This is becoming that comparison. Movie. That's why I wrote down as soon as I saw it. I was just like, hang on a second. I was led to believe this was this kind of movie.
Now,
but I think
we've got
more so than From Dusk Till Dawn.
Thing. Yeah.
Well, not just the horseman
with a massive
as Nige says,
penis.
His giant willy is on show.
It's the first thing you see.
It's terrifying because I was just like, what? But what I loved about this is, then there's all these others start coming out, and you're like, bloody hell, and he rushes off back to the office, and it's played so well. He doesn't like pretend it's not happening. He's like, what the hell? And Steve Lift is telling him, look,
you need to watch this video.
You need to watch the rest of this video, which was great. And one of the best, and it's really creepy. This video, it's like a horrible
claymation style
stop motion, but
and
like
again,
really
very Gondry style.
Very Gondry, and it even the name.
Yeah,
was it Michelle Dongri?
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah,
Michelle Dongri. Well, there's like a backstory to this, which I might as well tell now.
Oh, yeah, go on.
Basically, Boots Riley wanted to credit the claymation film to Michael Gondry as a tribute to the director. You can obviously see his influence on this film. And because the film was a parody, he didn't, which I didn't even realise it was really a parody. I don't think it necessarily is. But anyway, this is what it says. The film was a parody. He didn't have to clear Gondry's name for it. Decided to reach out to him to see if he was comfortable with the homage. And Gondry said, yeah, it's fine, but there's a couple of stipulations. If you do this, that'll be okay. Did it, and then finally Gondry's agents reached out and said, actually, you can't do this at all. So then Riley was like, well, fuck you, and did it, but changed the name to Michael Dongri as an insult to express his frustration with him, and announced he would continue insulting him in future movies until Gondry responded.
Wow.
So it's turned into this weird
seems
little
a bit
petty God knows what. So
that's really petty, isn't it? Considering
really silly.
You should be inspired by this guy, and then...
Yeah, if you appreciate the words of works of Michel Gondry.
Well, he just hates his agents, and again, this whole money grabbing thing, and like Boots Riley as well is someone who's been a protester for many years.
Wow.
Like in his teens, he was protesting. He's a sort of self-declared communist. Like there's a lot about his lifestyle that is, if someone fucks you over, he's not going to take it sort of sitting down, which I think is fair enough. But yeah, like this crazy claymation film about like cave
it's really
men
creepy
and women, and basically explaining how they've created this serum that turns your standard slave labor, which obviously they've already got, into like super slave labor, these like half horse man creatures who are twice as strong, etc.
Because normally in films, you're used to seeing them like being kind of like people being kicked out because of robots or AI or something, but in this film it's exactly injecting these people so that they or giving them a thing so that they...
Equisapiens, they're called, Equisapiens. So half equestrian,
so half
thespian.
And these people or things, are people. They talk and they, but they're just like kind of kept like slaves would have been, like, well, or maybe still are in some countries, I guess, like chained up, and it's so kind of... It's weird because it, like, you look at them and you kind of laugh when you first see it, but then it's really brutal. Like, it's so brutal the way they're kept and the way they're treated, and even the way like all the kind of rich people are there in their like drinking all their wine and their champagne, knowing that these people are, or things, these equestrian people. What did you say they're called?
Equisapiens.
Equisapiens. There
Sorry,
you go.
Yes.
This is me doing the very abridged version of his speech. He basically says, I want you as my man on the inside. I want you to be the Martin Luther King Jr. So I want you to become like an Equisapien that champions other Equisapiens. In other words, keeping them in line, keeping them as part of this, yes, this is us. We're working for a greater good. And in truth,
but also it's worth pointing out he's going to give him $100 million to do it.
Yeah.
Which
and there's an antidote after 5 years.
For 5 years, he said 5 years.
But for cash, it's like $100 million. It is basically like playing with that, like everyone has their price type thing. Whatever whatever
the $1 million man,
whatever the
Ted DiBiase.
DiBiase.
For those in the know.
But what I loved
when
about
you need to cut in money. Sorry.
That's nice. But what I did like about this moment is that you think, okay, so now he's going to consider his options, and in normal films they wouldn't go down this path, but he immediately goes public with it.
But I love the fact that, you know, like even once it's public, the fact that with him, people don't seem to care as much.
Well, as soon as he announces it, they're like, the shares have gone through the roof, and he's like doing the, what's it called when you ring the bell at the
stock exchange.
Like,
if anything, it's backfired.
It's like, well, that's a great idea. Yeah, slave labour, we'll make tons of money. Right, invest.
Well, it's one of the characters says it best. He says something like, you know, in this life, which is evident of the real world we live in, is that there, you know, something happens and you're like, oh my god, that's awful. Oh wait, I can't do anything about it. I'll just let it happen. And that's what they're saying about the Equisapiens. It's like, this has happened. As a normal average Joe, I can't do anything about it because I can't. How do I, an individual, go up against a rich, multi-billion-dollar corporation? And it's true. That's the world we people listening to this podcast, it's what we live in. That's the real world.
I mean, and it shows that through that importance of the union and standing up to them, and then it also shows along with that the kind of police brutality that we've seen over the years, especially in the States, with some of the protester scenes, which are some of the most shocking scenes in the film, where they kind of getting beaten and stuff on the picket line. But yeah, it is. How do you make a difference, and what is your price? What are you going to do to change that?
I got promoted. I'm a power caller.
What do they sell?
They're not selling it, we selling.
No, there's no amount of money that make me do that.
Here's the starting salary.
Well, man, I'm going to have to get me some new suits.
Well, what I love about like the what is your price thing. So obviously early on we said how like his character walks through the protesting group, and at one point a protester throws, I think it's like a can of Coke or whatever it is, and it's like smashes him in the head. And then that
cola bitch.
Yeah, cola, and then she sells out and like is part of the advertising for this cola brand. And like again, it just shows that kind of the American style, like the American dream is trample on everyone else to get what you want and take every advantage you can get. Yeah. And it shows it so perfectly in that instance. And again, he becomes like this internet meme and people are taking the piss out of him. And the only reason he can get on TV to kind of release this video to wider consciousness is by taking advantage of that celebrity, by his celebrity. But it's a show called like, what's the name of the show? It's something like
I got the shit kicked out of me. Something like that.
So it's like, oh yeah, for you to be able to show this video, you've got to have the shit kicked out of you by like 3 random like Italian gangsters, and then physically covered in shit. And then it's like, yeah, I can show my video.
In this film, that whole social commentary is really interestingly done, because a lot of the time it's done through comedy. It's done through, I guess you could say, almost like that Dusk Till Dawn, that horror kind of moment, but it's done in a way that doesn't always feel like surrealism. So it's not done in a way that I guess I'm used to seeing in this kind of film, if that makes sense. So yeah, you're often getting these really massive subjects. I mean, we've kind of spoke about all the subjects, but it's interspersed through the comedy and the surrealism, through almost like a kind of miniature love story as well. But yeah, it really does make you think, and something very original with this film, you know, like even like the look and the feel of it, you know, it's like kind of 70s decor in moments, and you know, you can see like some inspiration there. I reference Spike Lee, but I do see a bit of Spike Lee in this, weirdly. I know the style is totally off, but you know, Spike Lee, like many of his films, which I love and studied, always have very big kind of issues and things at the heart of them. But I guess the difference with this is that Michel Gondry, like you say, kind of inspiration that gets it through. The one bit, the double ending, I guess, is worth pointing out. The fact that it felt a bit
happily ever after.
Yeah, it felt a bit odd. So
yeah, he does transform into the horse, and as I said, like standing up against the machine, they storm sort of
Steve Lift's
house. Yeah, storm his place and sort of take him on face to face. And yeah, it's kind of like, you know what, if you do get organised and you do strike out against...
It was weird because at that ending bit, you see the bit where his nose goes, and then I think the credits start rolling, right?
The credits
and
start
then you're
rolling.
like, oh, cool, that's nice. And then all of a sudden, then he storms the house. It's almost like it kind of felt like, for me, I don't know if this would have been better or not. You storm the house, maybe he's not a horse. And then you have the kind of the intrigue of I'm turning into a horse at the end. You basically flip it slightly. So I felt like it didn't quite work, that 2-bit. I mean, I get why they did it, but...
I get why they did it, but the ending didn't land for me as well.
Yeah, and the other thing, this might be a stretch here, I was just thinking about it. Obviously, Cassius. When I think of Cassius, I think of Muhammad Ali, Cassius Clay. The reason Muhammad Ali changed his name to Muhammad Ali was because Cassius Clay, he said in interviews, Cassius Clay was his slave name. I don't know if that's a stretch or what, but I don't know if that's some kind of inspiration from the director.
Maybe. I mean, it's obviously probably one of the most famous black men to ever have lived, Cassius Clay. There's probably there's almost definitely a connection. I wouldn't say that's too much of a stretch, Smith.
No.
Well, his surname's Green as well, and obviously they call money the green in America. Again, might be a stretch, but there may be hidden, well, not necessarily hidden, but double meanings.
Whatever I wear, no, I'm here to be clean. It is morally emaciated. I can't ride with you.
I'm doing something I'm really good at.
Cash, I'm gonna make you a proposal. I can see that you want to say no, but I wouldn't do that before you see what I'm offering you. Cash, you are awesome.
Some for the homies and some for me.
Trivia time? That's where we're going.
Trivia. I mentioned LaKeith Stanfield obviously being in this. Donald Glover was originally approached to play the lead role. So, again, obviously someone who since has become very famous through both his acting and his music. But he had conflicts with Solo, a Star Wars story, which is a film I completely forgot existed, to be perfectly honest.
God, it did, yeah.
Yeah. So he recommended his co-star, who obviously got the role and was pretty damn good in it. But one of the most interesting things I think about this film, you've mentioned Boots Riley being part of the coup. He made the album Sorry to Bother You in 2012, which we then used as the soundtrack for this film.
That's very cool.
Later. And the soundtrack actually tells the same story. Well, the album tells the same story. So it was great that he was always sort of thinking about the idea, because it's kind of based on his real life working as a telemarketer. Obviously, I think there's some exaggerations to what actually happened in real life.
I'm sure there are.
But it's really interesting that they did that. And we've talked about the political side of this film quite a bit. And one of the really interesting bits is obviously Detroit's this artist, and she has these really elaborate earrings. And at one point she's got two with phrases like "bury the rag" and "deep in your face." With those two lyrics are from The Lonesome Death of Hattie Carroll, a song by Bob Dylan, which is a protest song about a poor African American woman murdered by a wealthy white man. Bury the rag deep in your face. Now it's time for your tears. So again, another way of expressing that message. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And that's a bit of my trivia for me.
Nice trivia. Mark recommended this film for us.
The Good.
He's written he's got some big words in here, so bear with me.
That's the Mark I know and love. Absolutely.
Especially,
he just wants to trip me up.
Well, he definitely will trip me up after. So Mark has written, when first considering a film for you all to discuss, I found the notion of plucking a single feature from the entire pantheon of critically lauded classics a little overwhelming. A week or so later, having been recommended Sorry to Bother You by a friend, I settled in for an unintimidating 1 hour and 52 minutes, a pleasantly unindulgent runtime. The recommendation came with a caveat. I was instructed not to look up a single thing about the film. Being a good boy, I did as asked. I went in completely cold. I cannot think of a better way to spend 1 hour and 52 minutes. A common tenet shared by all works of art I have enjoyed, by them film, music or literature, is the unfamiliar I can't say the word.
This is reading like someo's biography.
I know, it really is.
Then on a cold and rainy night.
Unfamiliarity.
I can't pronounce it.
Just skip. We know what you're trying
of their
to say.
tone. He talks in a sense of something new, fluid and unfixed. This is absolutely true of Sorry to Bother You. It is satire at its truest sense, taking scornful aim at a number of some of the most worthwhile targets in modern society. I love how the film's tone and Asiatic moves effortlessly from office comedy to political satire to something pretty close to horror without ever feeling forced or superficial. This is because at its core, it's a serious film masquerading as goofy, surreal comedy, a sincere exploration of the dangers of unchecked power, covert racial prejudice, exploration of labour, and the importance of unionisation. Some incredible performance, in particular from LaKeith Stanfield in the lead, and Armie Hammer, I'm losing my eyes, and Armie Hammer supporting, coupled with some genuinely original aesthetic and editorial techniques, elevate Sorry to Bother You from a tapestry of high concept satire to a fully realised universe with its own rules and logic. I've never seen another film quite like it, and the director Boots Riley deserves the huge plaudits for achieving something so singular, so idiosyncratic. I can't say that word.
Idiosyncratic.
So idiosyncratic. I can't say it anyway. Yeah, so coherent and so much fun. I'm going to let you guys read the next one next week. Because by the end of 2 hours, I can't read. Sorry to Bother You gets 5 popcorns from me. Popcorns is a rating scale developed by my friend Henry St. Ledger.
Henry St. Ledger.
Yeah, you could easily directly translate this to more conventional numerical rating system if you wish.
Oh my god, this review!
1,000 kisses.
He's tucked you right up. Yeah,
1,000 kisses from Overcast Bristol Mark. Thank you, Mark, and thank you for man. I'm sorry I butchered that because you've written it.
No, I mean that review was very impressive.
You've read it incredibly well, but
I think he has to record a voice message next time he needs a review just for your sanity.
Yeah, I don't think I could read another one. But Mark also wrote some lovely messages on Twitter. We had a bit of back and forth saying how much he enjoys the pod. So yeah, thank you.
Is he giving us 5 popcorn?
I hope so. Probably not for my reading of his review, but hey. Where do we sit on this? Etok, what do you think of this film?
There's so much about this movie I like, and there's a lot of this movie that I feel I should like. LaKeith Stanfield, he is, I think, amazing in this film. Like, he's so good. He basically carries this movie, which for an actor is always I can imagine, a very daunting situation, but he really does a great job. And like I say, I love his physical acting because this is going to sound like a random comparison. I'm all about comparisons tonight, but one of the best things about I think we may have talked about in the 1978 Superman film is Christopher Reeve as Superman stands upright, as Clark Kent slightly hunched over, ever so slightly, but enough that that's the thing that convinces everyone else that he can't be Superman. He's short, he's slightly shorter, he's hunched over, he's kind of insular. And I think that's what I love about this film, is that his character kind of goes through that transformation, not massively, but he's like really kind of shuffling about, kind of a bit insular, hunched over. And then as he gets the suits and he gets more the confidence, you see kind of his whole physical acting change. And like I say, I think he's pretty fucking phenomenal in it. My rating would be, I think, mostly based on his performance. I like a lot of what Tessa Thompson does. She's been in a lot of the Marvel films, obviously the Creed movies, numerous other things. I think the cast for this is really good. Danny Glover, I feel, is a little bit lost in this. It's like, yay! And then he's kind of out of it. But at the same time, if you had Danny Glover too prominent...
Yeah, he's not important in that.
It would be too distracting as well. You'd be like, oh, that film with Danny Glover. It's like, no, that's cool. The direction in this film is at times really beautiful. There's a scene with LaKeith and Tessa Thompson kind of sitting at the edge of a bed when they kind of reunite, and it's all done in prime. Like there's this beautiful reds and blues as they sit in their like plush apartment, and they're just sitting there chatting once they've reunited, and it's beautifully lit. It's so powerful, and we've talked about before the kind of Michel Gondry influences. There's a big fucking butt coming.
What's the butt?
I don't really... I feel that they try at the end of the film to kind of really play into the story of, don't betray your friends, basically money isn't everything, because he's like, I'm sorry, but I betrayed you guys, let's I'm gonna do everything I can in my power to earn your trust again. I just didn't feel there was enough of that camaraderie in the film to begin with to warrant what they were trying to go with that message. But my biggest problem with this is probably what a lot of people will probably love about this movie, but it really took me out of it, was the Equisapien thing. I really thought this movie was going somewhere really strong with the whole white voice thing. And I will say about the white voice, like Smith said earlier, and I think I said it as well, it really took me out of it. I love the idea. I really love the idea of doing the white voice. But the overdub, I think, is, for me, it was too jarring. I get that it's an aesthetic thing as they're trying to, really hammer home the point. But I feel that it kind of takes you out of every scene when you hear this voice that clearly isn't their voice. And I get that it's supposed to be almost like a magical, ethereal trick, but it just felt so kind of, I can't get into this. It's taking me out every time. And then, even though I thought the movie was going somewhere, as soon as the Equisapien thing happened, I was like, this movie's lost me now, because now it's become this weird, fantastical... Again, like I said at the start of my review, I feel like I should like it, but I couldn't. It just didn't work for me. I felt that the film lost a lot of the message it was trying to tell, that it built up so perfectly up until the party. The best way I summed it up, I was trying to figure out words to write, and the last two words I came up with was, it's compelling, but the ending is so disjointed. So that was my two words. In another universe full of Equisapiens, I'd probably rate this film really highly, but sadly I don't. But for its first half and for the acting of LaKeith Stanfield, I give it I'm just going to go with a 5 out of 10.
Oh wow! Oh okay. Yeah. Fine, fair enough. Yeah, it's a weird one. Like, I didn't really know anything about this film going into it, so I was quite surprised when the film started, where it took this kind of surrealist kind of like route, like right at the start. And I really agree with you on the white voice thing at the beginning. I found that like too far. I think they kind of went to a place where it was just a bit annoying for me. I totally get the idea and why they were doing it, but I actually think if it was just like that tiny bit subtler, it would have invested me more. I watched it with my wife, and she wanted to turn it off after half an hour, so I had to go back and watch this like on my own, because she really didn't get on board with this. But saying that, like, I really did kind of, I weirdly like settled into this film, and I felt like I went on a bit of a weird journey where, like, once I kind of got used to that, and once they stopped doing that silly voice, which was just a bit annoying, like the messaging obviously shines through, and it's rammed in your face, like everything like we've spoke about in the podcast and like what Mark said, and I do feel like that it's really well done in that sense, because it is so original, and I did like really enjoy the originality of this film. We've talked a lot about unoriginality in like modern cinema, especially big Hollywood films, and obviously like this is probably more on the, I guess, the indie kind of card, but still, like, it's just refreshing seeing a film that's like trying something different but still has a message. Yeah, like I agree, casting wise, I think they all do a really good job. I do feel like there were moments where I didn't really like his character though, because of, and maybe that's fine because of like his choices, and maybe that's an intentional, decision by the director-writer. So I feel like at times, like, did I care enough about him? I'm not sure if I did. I cared more about Stephen Yeun's character and even his girlfriend, but even her I found a bit annoying at times. So I felt like I went on like a weird journey with some of the characters in this film. Like, I don't feel like I always cared, and that's a dangerous territory to be in when you're kind of flipping into this surrealist thing that you don't care enough about the characters. So yeah, like for me, I feel like there's so much right about it, but I feel like there's so many bits that I felt like were not quite right. So I was like between a 6 and a 7. I think for its originality, yeah. Well, maybe I should, maybe I will. I'll go 6.5 because I feel like, yeah, I feel it. There is enough in this film that makes me like think, and that's a lot. Films don't. so yeah, I'll land at a 6.5. Nige,
I think
where are you?
So my review,
I reckon you're going to love this film for some reason.
I've got the luxury of having seen it twice, which obviously neither of you two had.
Yeah,
to be honest, like from what Mark said, it was the fact that it caught him so fresh, so surprised, like that he really loved it. And I knew a little bit about it beforehand, and like I said, I kind of had heard rumours or whispers or whatever you want to call it about that sort of Gondry aspect. The fact this kind of premiered at Sundance, it obviously had that indie sort of vibe and a little bit of buzz about it. Obviously, I've mentioned LaKeith, I'm a big fan of from Atlanta anyway, and he kind of plays like a quirky character in that, someone a little bit off the wall, so it kind of suited it very well. I think, bearing in mind as well that this film, the director, it's his first thing that he's ever done, ever directed, so it's a hell of an achievement in that sense. I do think there's elements of the film where it's a little bit disjointed, where things don't necessarily hit the mark, but I actually really liked the sort of white voices. That didn't sort of break the spell for me at all, and kind of watching it the second time especially, that was something I really appreciated as why they tried to do it. I do think the horsey moment is very shocking and a bit strange, a bit unhinged, and kind of takes you out of it. I don't like her character, Detroit's character, as much, but I kind of understand like her motivation in this and like how it kind of works for the rest of the story. But yeah, I think I don't know, it's one of those weird films, because when I watched it obviously the first time, I thought, yeah, that's pretty good, that's fine, I enjoyed it. And then when I came to watch it again, I was like, the only thing I can really remember about this film is it's like a slightly knockoff Gondry. And to be fair, even some of Gondry's work feels a bit like a knockoff Gondry. Like, some of it's nowhere near as good as, say, Smith's favourite film of all time. Come on.
Eternal
Sunshine, yeah. But yeah, it's like Science Asleep, I don't think is anywhere near
Science Asleep is, a bit mental.
But sort of going back to this, so there was loads of elements I love, like the undercurrent. I really like the soundtrack. I feel like, as I mentioned, some of it's a bit disjointed, but it's still enjoyable. And the ending is quite jarring, but I both liked it and disliked it. It was a really strange reaction. I'm going to go with 4 popcorns, so to speak. So I'm actually going to give it an 8.
8?
Yeah. So I think for a first-time effort, it's incredible from that perspective. I think there's some really great moments in it. I think it's quite cutting. It's obviously very political and topical, and it's surprising that this film, as I mentioned, like the soundtrack was conceived quite a few years ago. It wasn't during like the Trump administration, which is when I think this has almost come to a head about that sort of discrepancy, that difference between the haves and the haves not. I think it was written when Obama was kind of running the country, which kind of speaks volumes. And the fact that like socialism and communism is a dirty word, I think this film does a real great effort to show, there is power within people, like working together and fighting against the machine. And the director's worked with Tom Morello as well, so there's a very nice link there about fighting a bit of Rage Against the Machine.
Fight the power.
So I see what you did there.
8 out of 10 for me, gents.
Nice score. Nice film to review. Thank you, Mark. That was a really interesting one in so many ways. And guys, what do you think of Sorry to Bother You? Get in touch. Email us on Gmail. Gmail.com.
Email us on Gmail.com.
Email us at Google. What are they called? Worryview or whatever. At offradarpodcast@gmail.com. Tweet us at offradarpodcast. Get in touch on Facebook, on YouTube, and give us another film to watch. Get in touch on YouTube. What am I talking about?
When are you going to put us on TikTok, Smith? I'm sure there's amazing bite-sized bits.
Bite-sized. Yeah, I'm sure there are.